Well, welcome to the X Podcast. My name's Tim. I'm so glad that you are joining us today. Whether you're listening, you're watching this, we're glad to have you. I'm sitting in the host seat today.
You
and
are.
I've got some friends with me today. I've got Zach Brown Band.
Whoop.
Zach Brown, you want to sing us anything from Zach Brown Band?
No, I'm good.
Well, Michael W.
Girl Dad.
No.
Yep.
Girl Dad.
And
This is our
Girl-
second take.
This
Yes.
is our, well, yeah.
The first one was pretty
We
epic.
got called singing.
Yeah, that was great.
That was really good.
Anyways, I love this
I'll
shirt.
I'll sing next time for you.
Okay, would you?
Yeah.
I love this shirt.
You do. Every time I wear it, you always comment on it, and it makes me happy to know that it makes you happy.
It's your
Well,
Wednesday shirt.
I'm a girl dad, and you're a girly dad, and so I,
Oh.
I just you're
For
not.
everyone
but-
listening, he works that in every time I wear
I
this
know.
shirt.
Well, I
he has
just
to comment.
see girl, and my mind puts
dad.
a Y on the end.
For those who
No,
are
no.
listening, I'm a rather large person, 6'3". Won't talk about how much
What?
I weigh.
6'3" what? Are you
Yeah.
giving your measurements?
No,
what are you
no.
doing?
I used to play football. I'm not a girly dad.
Yeah.
I'm a father
he-
of girls.
He played wide receiver for what team?
I did not play wide receiver, but that's fine.
You were an offensive lineman.
Offensive
Center.
lineman. Center.
He snapped the ball.
Yes.
Anyway, so hey, we're glad to have you back on this podcast, and of course we've got Russell,
Hey,
my cousin from another mother.
somebody else asked me the other day if we're related.
Did they really?
They
Well, we have
did.
the same last name.
We do.
It's a popular last name. So
What are we talking about today?
Pretty common.
what are we talking about? We're talking about life. We're
Yeah.
talking about reality.
Speaking of audio adrenaline, were we
Okay.
talking about them?
What?
No.
Why do you?
No, we had to do a second clip because I was singing audio adrenaline.
Let's go. What song?
But there's a song by them I always loved. It was more of one of those talking songs. Remember they used to do that all the time?
Mhm.
And it says we talked about life, love, happiness, and then the Holy Ghost.
Mm.
And so I've ever,
How does it go though?
Yeah, how does it go?
I don't know.
What was that?
It was
Well,
something
no,
like
no,
a-
go.
something like
No,
a
sing
fl-
it.
It was like a flower pot
Sing
on
it.
the outside of the window. I can't remember the tune, but it was like a flower pot on the outside of the window. But it's all about life, love, happiness. So if you ever in this holiday season are wondering, what can I
Yeah.
talk about? What should me and my family, my friends talk about? Life, love, happiness, and then the Holy Ghost.
Makes
That's all you
sense.
need.
Okay, we're not going to talk about any of that today.
No,
Okay.
we're not. None
Okay.
of that.
Okay, let's. I thought as we are approaching Christmas, by the way, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
What'd you get me?
I got you something even more expensive than what you got me. As soon as I get it,
I
you'll get
guarantee you
yours.
did. Okay, so
Yep.
so as we approach Christmas, I thought, what better time to talk about truth and reality?
Oh,
I mean, it
perfect.
just makes total
Santa
sense
Claus?
with Christmas.
Yeah.
Santa
Yeah,
Claus?
that is. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, which is
Santa
this
Claus
question: Is
real?
Santa Claus real?
Yeah. What do you think? Yes or no?
Well, let me ask you this: do you lie to your children about Santa Claus, or do you tell them the complete truth about Santa?
We kind of like live in the middle. So it's like
Is there a middle?
they
Is there a middle
Yeah,
to
I
truth
mean,
and
You don't
lies?
like
I mean,
nuance.
Santa is he comes and he brings a couple gifts, and there's some gifts from Santa, but mom and dad always get to bring
Now-
the biggest gift.
That's not answering
Do
the
you-
question.
of
It
the year.
isn't. Do you dress up and wear a beard and show up for your kids like a white beard? Let me say,
No,
you have a beard. Do you
I-
dress up
This
and do you
happens,
put?
doesn't
Do you,
it?
do you, I have a
do not.
feeling.
I do not. I do eat the cookies.
Okay, I got you. So, I mean, that's a great question, though. Around Christmas time,
Right.
and we've, had people ask us that question before.
Right.
It's like, do you tell your kids about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny? I'm not really sure how that one snuck in there. And the Tooth Fairy and all of that, and
Leprechauns.
Jesus, and it's funny how people put that together. And Santa Claus. I'm just curious, though, because it is Christmas time. Did your parents? Did Santa bring you things when you were a kid?
Yes, Santa definitely was real.
Until what age?
See, here's the thing.
11.
Santa was real,
Let me break it to you
but
now.
I don't. Wait, Santa's not real.
Satan is real.
Satan is real.
Satan is real.
But Santa is not real. I don't know what
You don't remember?
age- I don't remember
Yeah.
what age the magic was gone or the wonder was lost or whatever. But I do remember believing in
Yeah.
Santa Claus.
What about
growing
you?
up.
You don't remember whether it was like sophomore, junior year, or like what? For me, it's funny because we were actually having conversations this week. I always forget about this, but like in kids ministry, in our context as a church, they said this past week they were having to like tell certain kids to shh because someone just found out. They were like, Santa's not real. Like,
Oh, no.
oh no, don't. We still have
geez,
some.
yeah.
So it's really interesting. But I do remember specifically being at the kitchen table and asking my mom and her crying. when I finally got her to tell me and
That Santa
acknowledge.
Wait.
real.
the
You
Santa
had to
wasn't
ask
real.
your mom,
Yeah.
and your mom cried. Doesn't it usually go the other way
Right.
around?
You,
like,
you would think so, but I think for her, it was that mom's heart of my, like parents. I'm sure I'll understand one day if I have kids, but parents will always post pictures of their kids from like a year ago, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
with the crying face. And I'm like, your kid looks happy. Why are you crying? They seem like it's a good thing they're getting older. That means they're not dead. But like. Parents will do that. So I guess it's one of those things of, he's getting older. He's moving off from this phase. He's losing some of his innocence.
Were you ever innocent?
I was always still innocent.
I think too. I can't remember. I feel like my parents didn't do a lot with Santa. I really feel like we didn't do Santa very much.
I
don't remember. I'd have to ask him. I'll have to ask him.
Yeah,
but I don't
I
think
kind of want to ask too because
didn't talk
he
about
wasn't
Santa.
around, but he was
No.
not talked about.
And then when we had kids of our own, we took them to see Santa, which those are the best pictures that we have. I mean, we have one of just they're screaming, awful, hated,
they're
sitting on
every
the
time.
strange man's lap.
It is kind of weird.
And so we did
an
that,
odd
and
tradition.
I think for a little bit we would do something like from Santa, but I was sure as heck. I told my wife, I was like, "There's no way I am given
All the credit.
that credit to this dude. Like I put this
Oh my
together.
gosh, I
I
can
was like,
picture this.
there's no way he's gonna." So
I was
get
up for
something
4 hours putting
We
the
did
kitchen
something
together.
small, and it was like, "Oh, Santa brought this," and it
Yeah.
would. And I think we would. I think my wife would do this,
Like,
and
"Santa's stingy."
we'd like wrap one present. I think she did one present in different wrapping. So all of the presents were kind of similar, and then there was one that was wrapped in a different wrapping, and so it's like, and it was small. I was not giving Santa credit for everything that we spent money on. I wanted them to know I did it,
Makes sense.
not Santa. Anyways, but moving
sense.
on from Christmas, I think that brings up an interesting construct in our society today, which is truth. When you think about truth, and we were talking a little bit about this, and kind of all of us read a book by John Mark Comer, your favorite author, I think.
Have you heard of him?
One of my favorites.
One of your favorite authors,
One of my
called Live No Lies. I'll hold it up, so if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see. It's a great book. I do recommend this book.
Very
I think
good.
we'd all recommend this
Yeah.
book.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
if you're somebody that, especially if you're a Jesus follower, but if you're curious, I mean, I think he's a great thinker.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's a timely book for our age.
Yes.
And so really for anyone, I think for any Christian, it's a compelling vision of what it actually looks like to live an authentic Christian life.
Yeah.
Right.
But I also think he nuances so much of truth and cultural, where we are at in this cultural moment that, like you said, I think anyone from any background
Yeah.
would find it intriguing and helpful.
I agree. And I think one of the things that is fascinating that he has to address, because if you're going to talk about lies, you have to describe truth.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he says, just a real simple definition. Again, he kind of makes reference to there is this phrase that he references in here, and it's kind of an epic phrase that comes from the moment when Jesus was standing before Pilate.
Yeah.
And, Pilate's asking Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus is like, "So is that your idea? Or did someone tell you that about me?" And they kind of have this little bit of exchange, and Jesus makes a reference to all of my followers. They basically kind of know the truth. And that's when Pilate says, "Well, what is truth?"
Yeah.
And immediately what you see in that response, and we're talking a couple thousand years ago,
Right.
you see this response of, okay, you're telling me what you think truth is. How do I know that that's truth? Of subjective nature
Right.
to how we approach this idea of truth.
Right.
And I wanted to read this and then just get your guys' thoughts. As Comer tried to kind of define, he said the best definition I know of truth is reality or that which corresponds to reality. And he said this: "It's easy to get lost in the metaphysical weeds, but for our non-technical purposes, truth is what we can rely on as real." He says the chair I'm sitting on is reality. The air I'm breathing is reality. And then in the faith version, he says Jesus is reality. And so the idea of truth has to be and is intrinsically connected to reality.
Yeah.
How do you guys, what do you think about that as a definition, and how does that play out where everything in our culture that we once would have said, I would go back 100 years, let's not go 2,050 years, 100 years, that we'd say this is the truth of what we believe collectively, has kind of shifted now and has become far more subjective. And so this idea that it needs to be connected to reality, but then we can start saying, well, who's reality? So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think well, I love, because that question, what is truth? Mm-hmm. That really is the question we're all still asking. But I feel like we're asking it like in different ways as the generations and the millennia changes. In that moment when he said, what is truth, there's an assumption that there is truth. Mm-hmm. And objective truth. Yeah. So I think that question, when he says, what is truth, the question implies objectivity of truth. I think at some point that changed through the centuries into subjectivity of truth, which maybe the question changed from what is truth to is there truth. Nowadays, I think it's subjective, but it's almost, if objective truth turned to subjective truth, now I think it's pluralistic truth. And maybe it's not even a question anymore, it's pick your truth.
Yeah.
A great example of that, I was in a conversation recently with a group of young people, and we were talking about sexuality and all the different forms and nuances of that in our culture today. And one of the people I was with, she was talking about just the different views and takes that people have when it comes to that particular topic. And she kind of ended her phrase with, but it's whatever. People can think what they want. They can just live their truth. And that whole idea just struck me like, man, we really don't have a strong definition or source for truth in our culture today.
Yeah, it's so true. And the sad reality is that it really, really matters.
Yeah.
It really, really matters. I was thinking about it when we were talking a few minutes ago about what we might talk about. About 10 years ago for my birthday, every once in a while, somebody will give me a book or I'll buy a book that the title actually impacts me more than the content. One of those.
That's not a good book, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good title.
Yeah. So, like, when I first got here, I took the team, when I first moved here from Atlanta, I took the team I was leading through a book by Marshall Goldsmith. It's a business book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember a ton between the covers, but I remember just that title alone is like, it sticks with you. Another example, though, would be 10 years ago for my birthday, one of my best friends got me a book. And it was, from a faith perspective, I think it's actually by R.C. Sproul, but the title of the book was The Consequences of Ideas. And every chapter went through a major shift that we don't even, there's so many of our lenses or perspectives of how we view reality we just think is normal or it's innate to us, and we don't realize how much it's been shaped by the thinkers before us. Nazism. Yeah. When we think of, let's think about it from a negative impact. 11 million Jews. When we think of a whole World War II, when we think of all of those things that happened, you trace that back to it. When you trace all that back, it goes back to an idea.
Yeah.
Someone believed something.
Yeah.
And then they believed it so passionately that other people believed it. And it formed a worldview that shaped our history forever.
Yeah.
You can take that from the good and the bad. Slavery or abolitionism or teetotalism or Christianity or love or creativity. All of these are ideas. And, Proverbs says it this way, as a man thinks, so is he. In other words, the way I think is going to determine how I live. Yeah. And the quality of my thoughts is going to determine the quality of my life. So everything about what we believe about whatever we believe about reality and our perspective, I think I may have mentioned this in one of the other podcasts, but, the examples are limitless. But a few weeks ago when I played the Oculus for the first time, virtual reality, within moments, I was trying to decide, wait, what is reality?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was afraid to take a step on my friend's carpeted living room floor an inch away.
Right.
Because my reality had shifted to, if I take a step, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on an individual level and on a global level, our perspective impacts everything about the way we think, feel, who we are. I got on a deep dive last night. I was telling you this is really weird. This is not healthy. Don't do this. But I went back and forth. I could not sleep last night. And I went back and forth between a YouTube rabbit hole of theological debates and reading about serial killers. Really not healthy. And don't go do that. But when you look at you psychoanalyze these people that were so deadly and destructive. What they believed impacted how they lived and what they did.
Yeah.
And so for all of us on the microscopic level to the macroscopic level.
I think a good point to that you make is what is the undergirding of what you consider to be truth?
Yeah.
And I know it seems such like a vague topic because basically what we're saying is you can apply truth to every single thing that you think about, everything that you believe, everything you do. But what we've seen, I think, in our culture, I know I've seen a shift in the last probably 2 decades,
Right.
more so. But from this idea of, I think that there were some truths, some axioms that were just kind of universally held.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of that started with an idea. They've spread. What really does cause people to hold something as truth comes down to how it lines up with reality.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, I mean, what you believe about spiritual things and that, you're going to come face to face with reality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come face to face with reality, that's what's going to really determine what you can get from it, what makes sense.
Just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's true. It's only when you begin to put that idea into place, or you let that idea begin to shape your actions, your behaviors, how you begin to interact with others or the world around you, that reality sets in. That helps you determine if that is truth or not.
Yeah, it's almost like until you decide, I mean, you can choose that you don't believe in gravity until you step off the ledge.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to knock your head against the fact, oh, wait, there are some things that are true and real.
Right.
What was the quote by the philosopher? You can go against the grain of the universe, but you're going to get splinters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think kind of going back to the example you shared, to bring it down to the here and now, is we live in a day and age where there's not much of an assumption that there is truth.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much of an assumption that if there is truth, that you can know it.
Mm-hmm.
It's looked at almost as different flavors of the ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like this modern version of all roads lead to Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you decide is fine for you. And I think there's a lot of dangers. There's the danger of, again, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to live out whatever you believe. So if you are living something that's contrary to reality, you're going to get splinters.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get splinters in your soul. You're going to cause people around you splinters. And then there's this other thing that I don't know if you guys noticed this, but it seems like wherever we don't have a strong grasp on reality, or we don't have deep roots of conviction, we create a lot of false equivalencies.
Mm-hmm.
So religion would be a great example.
Yeah.
You ever heard somebody say, well, yeah, I know they say that Jesus is the only way, but there's a lot of religions that believe that. Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, and so who can really know? It's this false equivalency that they're all the same. And then they'll say, so pick whatever's right for you, always lead to Rome. But if anybody is actually a deep enough thinker, they wouldn't say that, because you can go back to ancient religions of the Aztecs where they would sacrifice their children through the heart to the sun god. And I think when you put that on par with loving, benevolent philosophies, even if you don't agree with their God, they're not the same.
Right.
So I think where we don't have strong convictions, we tend to broad brush in ignorance all these things. Then we create false equivalencies and shrug our shoulders like, well, who can know? Nothing's real.
Right.
Instead of actually doing the work to say, if truth matters, then I need to dig until I actually get to it.
I think one of the things that is really fascinating about the time that we're living in, because you said that who can really know what is true, but I think even now, I think the question is becoming, how do we know what's even real? Because it's just fascinating to me, going from a time of like when you look at different ages based on philosophy, and you say modernity, and that was during the Industrial Revolution, the Scientific Revolution, all of that, and then they think that we switched to a postmodernism, possibly in the 90s. Some say it was as early as 80s, 90s, 2000s, whatever. And I remember learning about that in school, and just like the mindset that everything is subjective, that there is no real objective thing. And then you think about where we're going with virtual reality.
Yeah.
That our world is shifting to creating a metaverse where you can spend time in it, and it's an alternate reality.
Yeah.
It's not, but if you're in it, it's just as real.
Yeah.
Inside of it. And so what I see is like culturally, and everything is shifting to where reality is called into question. Which is almost getting to be a very odd thing. There's nothing concrete anymore. And if everything is constantly moving underneath of us, in other words, if there is no like objective truth to when it comes to our government and how it operates, when it comes to our lives and how we live them, if there's nothing that we establish as an objective truth, then our lives are going to be constantly, it's going to be like being on the ocean. You know, they're going to go ebb and flow with whatever is happening culturally.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure that in the end, we're going to love the way life feels.
Right.
Like reality is going to hit us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm someone who likes to ask the question, why? Like, why did that shift happen? Because I remember growing up, and it used to be that, you know, you did these sorts of things in this way, and culture was organized in this way. But now, it just seems like all of those old paradigms have just been completely blown away and blasted. And I think it's interesting if you're out there and you're like, you know, am I this way? Do I maybe struggle with conviction, or what? Or maybe you're struggling with what? How do I believe, or how do I know what is true in a world in which there's a lot of different realities that exist or that could possibly exist? And it's an interesting thing to think about when it comes to why.
Why do you think there is such a lack of maybe a grip, a willingness to commit in this generation to, okay, I'm going to stake the claim this is true, and I'm going to commit to it?
I think, just from what I've observed, it's because when you have conviction, a lot of times that means looking at something else and saying, well, that's wrong. And I think we try to be, and for the most part, it's a good thing. We try to be open-minded. We try to live with nuance and say, hey, well, you know, we try to live with inclusion and include others. But there's a point where you can do that almost too much where it's harmful. And where it's like, at some point, you have to draw a line somewhere and say, no, this is what I believe. This is why I believe that.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, they just have a hard time really looking at someone else who thinks differently than they do, who maybe thinks a little different, and saying, no, actually, you're wrong. Or that doesn't correspond to reality.
Yeah, I wondered if, just as you're talking, if maybe the three biggest reasons people don't believe in absolute truth or believe they know what absolute truth is. Number one, this is kind of faith frame we're talking. They haven't had a real enough encounter with something that stands in stark contrast to all the other competing voices and ideas. If number two, kind of what you're speaking to, it's interesting how morals and virtues change by the generation. Littering is more of what you would call almost a sin or a moral violation now than would be a sexual promiscuity.
Right.
And so right now, open-mindedness is more of a virtue than maybe even purity or propriety or anything else. And then I think number three, too, if you stake the claim of conviction, especially in a faith context, you are also simultaneously submitting yourself to accountability. That's why it's easier to talk in terms of the universe. The universe is for me. Because you're never going to be accountable to the universe.
Right. It's not personal.
And so I wonder if those three things happen. Like, it's interesting. I've quoted him before, but G.K. Chesterton, I love what he says. Because we absolutely, if you've listened to us for any amount of time, we espouse open-mindedness. We espouse nuance. But I love some of what G.K. Chesterton said. He said the whole point of opening your mind is to eventually close it again on something solid. And he warns against being so open-minded that your brains fall out. What does it look like? So what's the dance? Or sorry, I may have interrupted. You may have about to say that. What's the dance of opening your mind, and how do you find something solid to close it on again?
Well, no, I was just processing, thinking about culture, thinking about what it was like when I was in college, and thinking about just the conversations that we were having, and knowing that there was definitely a shift in education and other things. That I just remember, the big word of the 90s that I remember was tolerance. Like, and I think I think unfortunately what you have is, you might have a group of people that felt like they have the truth, but they didn't know how to live the truth in love, whatever it was. And so there was a rebellion out of that culturally. There's a rebellion out of that. Because it was very exclusionary. It was just and dogmatic and I think hurtful.
Right.
We've seen that even in the church at times. That we've seen in the church that there's been that kind of response to people that are different, think different.
Right.
And so we see this huge swing back in the other direction, which is major words of like being open-minded, inclusionary, tolerance. What's interesting today is that the least tolerant people are the ones that were banging the drum of tolerance in the 90s.
It's funny. G.K. Chesterton, the same.
I mean, that has flipped it.
The same guy I was just quoting. He says this, and let me preface this. When it comes to how I think some people would define tolerance, we're all about it. What I love about our church context is, in fact, other churches sometimes critique us on this, is that people, no matter their background, no matter their lifestyle, no matter what, come in this place and feel loved and accepted. That's one of our heartbeats. Jesus loves all people. They're welcomed. But tolerance has kind of shifted forms into it is wrong to say something's right or wrong.
To disagree.
Yes.
You're right.
I love G. Chesterton said this, and this is back. It's kind of prophetic. He said this about 150 years ago, and it's just an interesting thing about it. He said tolerance is the virtue of the man with no convictions.
Yeah.
And could it be sometimes, the parent that refuses to get on to his kid and to warn them and tell them right or wrong is the parent that doesn't care. And not that we're to be each other's parents, but is it possible to actually have strong enough convictions that we are loving of all people, but intolerant enough to call a spade a spade?
Yeah. No, I think living a life of conviction is something to strive for. It's dangerous when you get to a place and you just say, I'm so blown by the wind like a leaf, where you just let whatever kind of sway your thought process in what you do. Because I think what ends up happening is, if you're not careful and you get to a place where you want to be open-minded, and I get why you want to do that, because you want to be welcoming, you want to be friendly, you want to do all those things. But eventually, if you get to a point where, like you said, your brains start falling out, you're not willing to draw a line somewhere, then whatever the current wind of culture or whatever media you're consuming, whatever music you're listening to, whatever thing that you're putting into your brain, like that's going to be what you end up believing. And if you're not careful, what you end up believing is going to influence what you end up doing, which could actually end up being a contrast to what you say you actually believe.
It's really interesting.
You end up living a hypocritical life.
Kind of what you're saying as far as it's a powerful thing to think about. This is a churchy word I'm about to use, but John Mark Comer and John Tyson, another one of his contemporaries, uses this phrase a lot, that all of us are being discipled by something.
Right.
Discipled, in other words, we're being mentored, formed, our lives shaped. Even if you're not a follower of Jesus, whatever media you're consuming, whatever music, by the majority of the music you're inputting, your influences around you, are all being discipled. So the question isn't, is there truth or am I becoming something? It's what is shaping me and what truth am I moving towards?
I think at the end of the day, what we have to all, at least, we don't have to, but I think we should agree on, is there is a reality for life. That we're living in it. There's also a reality for what happens to us when we die. There's a reality of whether there is a God or there isn't a God. There is a reality, which means there is a truth. And so and I think what's happened is, we've stripped truth of its depth and its meaning and its solidarity, and it has become very subjective, very personal. And I think, again, part of that process has been to not offend people. I think I get the whole. I agree with you. We're very. We want to be very inclusive, regardless of what you think you believe. We say all the time, you don't have to believe to belong. You can come be part of this community. I feel confident enough in what I believe, and the God that I serve, that it doesn't scare me. I want, and I'm going to love you regardless. And I think the biggest issue that has been missing, I want to say this in church circles when it comes to beating the truth drum, has been not enough of knowing how to, as the Bible says, to speak the truth in love.
Yeah.
And I think that's been part of the problem why the rest of the world has said, we want to stop listening. We're going to stop listening to the church because the church is, I said this, I think it was last weekend, but, you know, that you can stand on a street corner and yell at everybody because in your eyes, they're not following the truth.
Yeah.
But that's not what Jesus told us to do.
Yeah, you did a
you know what I mean? You're supposed to see they're supposed to see your good deeds.
right.
And that is what will draw them to who God is. And so I think that we have misappropriated truth.
Yeah.
If we have. I'm just saying. And this sounds
on
very
that note, I just want to speak. We actually just got an email. Now, for our context, we're a church, and someone wrote in and they were asking, about the way our church viewed homosexuality and just that lifestyle, and they were asking if someone who practiced that lifestyle would be welcome here. And it was fascinating to me. You know what the first thing they said in the email they led with? They said, we've asked this question before of other churches, and we feel like we never get a straight answer.
It's
And
interesting.
I just,
Yeah.
it's curious to me that why do we have such a hard time? The church is supposed to be a place where there is conviction and all those things, but sometimes I think we have a hard time speaking that.
Well,
conviction.
It's not popular to have a moral or whatever kind of stance on something, even if you love someone, the purpose of that, and you go, but I'm going to disagree with you. That language is you might as well that's hate speech.
Right.
Yes.
And regardless of what it
today.
is,
And it
in our
seems to
cultural
be-
today, and versus going, no, I actually love you. I would love to go have lunch with you. Like we'd be friends, but we might not agree on on this subject, whatever the subject is.
Right.
It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, there's this quote by Rick Warren that I see always reposted on Facebook, but given to other people, where basically he says we've accepted two lies: that one, to believe something means you're a bigot, and that two, that I can't disagree with you and still love you.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what y'all think about this, because one of the things, we always say this: we're in unprecedented times, blah blah blah. It's true, and we're in such divided times. It seems like one of the root causes of division, maybe especially in the Christian world, because there's a lot of debate between super conservative or super liberal and everything in between of how you approach truth, there's a lot of debate and disagreement on what is the biggest need in this dark and divided world. And it seems like you got one camp, because almost for a while, like the whole truth drum we're beating, it's like you almost want to be careful because you know how many people are turned off by the people that are the truth tellers. They're the 1 Corinthians 13. You may tell the truth, but if without love, you're a clanging gong.
Yeah.
And it's reeked for years. This Pharisaicanism.
Yeah, it's good.
Pharisaical. What's the noun? Anyways, Pharisee type behavior and attitude. This judgmentalism. This Christian nationalism, this political bed of just, and so I think in response, a lot of times we'll lean back and we'll say, okay, what the world really needs right now is love. What they need is grace. What they need is this. And both of those are true, but it almost seems like there's this reactionary, maybe not reactionary theology, maybe it's reactionary methodology. It seems like one camp is like, There's this verse from Isaiah, and I think it describes today, where it says, truth lies fallen in the streets. And I believe we're in that day where truth lies fallen in the streets. So you got one camp that's like, well, what we really need, we need some people to have the courage to stand up in church and tell the world what's right and what's wrong. And then you have another side that is so turned off by the hypocrisy and the judgmentalism and the bad approach of that side. They're like, no, what we really need to do is just love and serve the world, and in the right moments. Does that make any sense? And it seems like there's almost this debate. And at the end of the day, you did a great message the other week about how Jesus came full of truth and grace.
Yeah, I just think that when we live in one camp or the other, rather than walking with both, that's when we end up. One might be easier. Yeah. Like you can just respond to an email and go, "This is the way it is," and I don't have to worry about you. Another one might be, no, we're going to, it could be anything. You talk about, no, we're accepting of this, and, again, pick your topic. Doesn't matter. That it's messier to walk with both.
Yeah.
And I think that same thing is modeled across politics and everything else.
Yep.
It's easy to jump on one side and just go really far on
Right.
one side, an extreme. It's messy to walk in the middle.
Yeah.
To be friends with people on all sides, to say, I see your viewpoint. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I understand why you feel the way you feel. That's messy.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, we just see people, it's funny. I mean, we see people filtering into further and further away. We see the polarization happening politically. We see it happening morally. We see it happening just throughout our society, that we're moving further away from each other into these different sides. And what we have today, even politically, is we have different realities.
Yep.
There's only one reality.
Right.
But we're living in different realities.
And no political party fully embodies true reality.
No.
Not one party.
And this is the problem. So I think that coming back to the question of truth, what is truth? I think that question gets applied to everything we believe.
Right.
What is true? You could say it this way: what is true in this situation? What's true with this whatever I'm facing, whether it's a moral, a value, whatever. What is true? And I believe that the answer to that is really only fully known when you see the fruit of it, because it's based in reality.
Yeah.
And there's a phrase that Jesus once said where he said that talking about wisdom, said wisdom is proven right by her children.
Right. Yeah.
And in other words, that you don't know that it was wise or it was right until you see the fruit and the offspring of it.
Yeah.
And so what I think we have today, culturally speaking, is we live in a very, like you said, it's pluralistic. We in every area it seems like, we've moved away from there being a right and wrong. There's 50 shades of gray in between. There's that reference for, okay. There's a lot of shades, but not do 50.
That was an interesting numerical choice.
It's just a cultural term that everybody understands.
Okay.
Have you seen churches that did series called 50 Shades of Gray? And it's just, please, Lord, don't do that.
No.
But there's all these shades of gray in between. Everything has, become very non-binary constructs in our culture today. Don't put me in a box. Don't limit me. I'm going to live my life. This is my truth. This is my world, my reality. And we are in a culture where it's become, and that's fine. I think we have freedom. That's one thing. We have freedom. You want to live that way, you can. And basically the only line that we basically have one fundamental truth in our culture today. Just one. All the rest is up for debate. That one is, as long as what I say and believe doesn't hurt you or other people, right? That's the big thing that we say.
Right.
As long as you're not hurt, as long as I'm not hurting anybody, what does it matter?
As if we're islands that don't affect.
Exactly. But I'm just saying seems to be the one underlying thing that we're going to all agree on. As long as I'm not hurting anybody, why does it matter how I want to live and how I want to do and that's fine. At the end of the day, there's only one truth. There's one reality. You go down a road based on what you believe to be true, and I think today I think more often than not, rather than discovering truth through finding out what is real, what we are most often doing is we are picking and choosing what we want to be true.
Yeah,
and then we're following and building a life. Like today in the church world, we had a whole episode on this. It's about deconstructing your faith. And so today people are deconstructing what they've been told. There's nothing wrong with that. We did a whole episode on that. But then what are you building that upon? There's got to be some objective source of truth in your life that you are going to say, I am going to stake my claim on this.
Yeah.
And we will all find out. I mean, a lot of Christians I know, and pretty smug, we have the truth. You can go into any world religion and they feel the same way and feel like everybody else is wrong.
Right.
At the end of the day, there's only one reality. And we're all going to find out what we were right about and what we were wrong about.
Right.
Which is why I like even when I did the Origin series, even the other one, I like to create. I like to at least point out there is only one reality, and the truth is this: we're probably all going to find out we were right and wrong about a lot. We'll probably find out we were wrong about a lot more than we thought we were.
Right.
And there are some things we were probably right on. There's a lot of things we were wrong about. So why do we need to get into arguing and fighting as much as we do and proving somebody else wrong? You know, at the end of the day, I feel like it's like, here's what I would say. And if you are a follower of Jesus and you're listening to this today, and your first instinct, because of maybe how you were raised or your church experience, your first instinct is, I need to make sure everybody around me knows the truth. What I would say is, instead of them hearing it from you, let them see it born out of your life. And when they see something real, in other words, they see you have real love for your spouse, you have real love for your kids,
You have real love for them.
You're real love for them. You're genuine in what you do and how you manage your money. You're like, you know what they're going to say? I want what you have.
Right.
Right.
And they're going to say, whatever you have must be true.
Right.
Right.
And
Good.
so I think we have to look at this as what we've done is we've removed the ramifications, we've removed the accountability, we've removed what is the end result, because there are a lot of people that say they're living their truth, but they're miserable.
Right.
They're living their truth, and you can do that today, but they're not happy.
By the way, the stats bear that out. I mean, you talk about depression being higher than ever, anxiety being higher than ever.
You have more freedom than ever
Yep.
to live your truth,
But we're
and
unhappier than ever.
we are far more unhappy than we've ever been. There's suicides are up. You know what I mean?
It reminds me of one of the elders of the church I was at. He was a superintendent of the school district, and he had this big poster. It summed up who he was on the back wall, and it was, "You are free to choose your choices. You are not free from the consequences of it."
Right.
There you go.
So there is reality, and we can choose what we want to be reality. But at the end of the day, we're going to bear the fruit
I love it.
when we come up against it.
That's
Right.
good. I think that's a great way to just wrap this conversation
And
up.
I
think
love one of
that's-
the things that you did is you always, through the Origin series, pointed us back to the source.
Right.
So I think a couple of things that we're saying is truth matters more than we could ever know. And none of us have the market cornered on everything that is truth. One of the greatest theologians that ever lived, one of the most brilliant, N.T. Wright, I mean, knows all the languages, Greek, Hebrew, whatever, but I love the humility. He says, I am 100% convinced that I am wrong about at least 20% of my theology. He said, the problem is I just don't know what it is. Now, that's honesty. But
That's why, believe it or not, we don't debate about a lot of things or get deep into certain aspects of really, I want to say, questionable, because I know myself
You're right.
that I can argue for a variety of different sides when it comes to theology
Right.
from that. So you know what? I just leave my hands open.
But you always
And-
point
and-
people to the source.
Yeah.
That there is a person.
There is a person behind the truth. And that's why I think one of the most significant things that Jesus said, right, when he was asked about truth in John 8.
Yep.
And he said, my disciples know the truth. And they follow me, those who follow me, And he said, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And so I think you can look at that and say, the way you know the truth is how it bears out in your life, and if it sets you free.
That's good.
In your life.
That's a good principle. The greater level of truth you're living in, the greater ultimate level of freedom.
And freedom doesn't necessarily mean
Not freedom to
that
do
I'm
what you
freedom
want.
to go do whatever I want, because
Right.
at the end of the day, you can find out that's going to lock you up.
Yeah.
Correct.
You can go live your life and get it, if you want to get addicted to things and do all that stuff, but I can tell you from every person I know that's been addicted, you talk to them, they're not free.
Not free.
And so we're talking about real freedom
Yeah.
in your life, that's how it bears out. That's how you know that it's real. And so, I think that for me, I'll just say personally, I have staked my life and my beliefs, my morals, my values on the scriptures. That's where I've staked it, on Jesus. who Jesus is and how he bears out through what we have preserved in scriptures.
Right.
And so, and you may be listening or watching this and you may go, I don't believe the Bible. Well, go listen to week 5 of the Origin series and I'll tell you why I do.
Right.
But if you notice something that I did with that series, it really is kind of spells out why I believe what I believe personally. Was I started with a really deep philosophical question that was not including the Bible, which is there a God?
Is there a God? Yeah.
Yeah.
And depending on how you answer that question, will lead you on how you address the other questions.
Yeah.
Where do we come from? Where did the universe come from? How you answer these questions, they just keep filtering down. Where did I come from? How I answer that question, if I believe there's a God, and it just keeps filtering down. Who is Jesus and his life and all those statements? And I believe that I really intended to try to take, yes, there's some subjectivity to that, but I used a lot of information and things that people that were not followers of Jesus to say, how do we get to what we, at the end of the day, it does take faith, and I feel like my faith is based on a lot of really tangible things. And so your faith can actually rest on what is real.
Yeah.
I trust this chair, so I sit in it.
Yeah.
And so your faith can be the same way. And so we live in a culture where I think we have to figure out how we're going to balance living in a culture that everything is fluid. And how do we, where are the moments where we represent truth, but we do it in love?
Yeah.
How do we allow grace to lead? Jesus was full of grace and truth, as John says, and in that order.
Yeah.
How do we allow that, but at the same time, how do we also hold on to something tangible because that's what's going to keep you in life. We need anchors in your life. And I think we need those. And for me, it's scripture, and who Jesus is and the methods, they're going to change. I'll leave it open hand with methods.
That's good.
But when it comes to the person of Jesus, when it comes to what I understand Scripture and what it means to follow him, those are the things that I'm going to hold, as my principles, my values. And at the end of the day, I might be wrong, but guess what? My life is going to bear out the fruit of what I believe is true.
Yeah.
And so either people will, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, either people will look at my life and say, whatever he follows, whatever he believes is true or not. And at the end of the day, I stand before my Creator and based on what I believe, and that's what matters for me, and and what people see out of my life.
Right.
Yeah.
So that to me is like how I, because this is deep. Let me just say this conversation is
deep.
really philosophically deep.
Yeah.
And it's very relevant, and it's really hard to parse out really clean-cut answers.
Yeah.
Right.
So I feel like we've talked about a lot, but it's like there's not going to be, hey, do A, B, and C, and you're going to find the truth. I mean, I feel like you can, but I don't want to impose that upon you. But I'm going to hopefully, by watching my life, what I was led to, the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus himself, that you would say, okay, I think that is the realist version of reality in a virtual world that we live in today.
That's good.
So anyways, fun conversation. So I just want to say, hey, we're glad to have you with us today. And if you have any comments, if you really didn't like Zach's shirt, if you thought something Russ said was offensive, you can send us an email to podcast@thex.church.
If you Google search all of his quotes and they were
if his quotes were all wrong, G.K. Chesterton's quotes were all wrong, you can write us, let us know. But if you know somebody that is, I would say, if you know somebody that's wrestling with what is true, if you know somebody that is deconstructing, if you know somebody that's in that place where they just feel like, I don't know what to believe anymore, that maybe share this conversation just to spark a little bit more. And again, any feedback, we always welcome them. And subscribe and share the podcast. We'd love to get the word out a little bit more. But thank you for joining us. Merry Christmas. We want to say that. We hope you have an incredible Christmas and a wonderful holidays. We'll catch you next time on the X Podcast.